Motorboat yachting are down here in sunny Portland on what must be one of the most beautiful days this year. Anyway, we're down here to do a used boat review on the boat I'm standing on, which is a Fairline Targa 50 GT. This one dating from 2011 to 2015. Now, I know you're going to miss him, but my esteemed colleague Nick Burnham has handed over Motorboat and Yachting's used boat reviews to me, so he can concentrate on his Aquaholic YouTube channel. And Nick was extremely good at these used boat videos, so in comparison with Nick, my very first attempt is more a comedy of errors with a carefully crafted commentary. Please feel free to feedback, suggest improvements using the incredibly calm, reasoned, analytical channels that social media is so renowned for. I am a sensitive boy though, so go easy on the death threats. So anyway, so why the Targa 50? Why would you consider buying this particular sports cruiser in preference to any other? Well, when it was launched back in 2011, Fairline had three very talented and free-thinking designers working for them in the form of Adam Greenwood, Andy Pope and Graham Warren. And they also had a hugely competent engineer and boat tester called Martin Hicks, who kept the creators anchored in the real world. And the consequence was that the Targa 50 did break the imaginary mould. Fairline's designers were able to conjure a 50-foot sports cruiser that was genuinely different from some of its rivals. So the question is, what makes it different? Well, I think the best thing to do is head straight for the space that wows everybody, no matter what. So we're heading forward now into the area of the boat that takes everybody's breath away, no matter what their expectations. So this is the master cabin forward. Now, Fairline really do things differently here, not least because they put it forward. Around that sort of era, 21st century sports cruisers around this sort of size, the trend was to site the master cabin amidships, and they were quite spacious affairs, but they were often arranged on several sort of trippy levels in terms of floor space. And the big advantage this cabin has is that it's allowed Fairline to incorporate huge amount of single level floor space with extremely good headroom all the way across the boat into this cabin. There really isn't anything quite like it around this sort of size, and two people can wander around here really easily at night, at bedtime, without bumping into each other. You can see there's a lovely little stylish dressing table area there off to starboard. TV opposite the bed, and then if we move aft through the door, this is the owner's ensuite heads. This is complete with its separate shower compartment, which is always nice to have, keep things nice and tidy. Very stylish, and plenty of headroom again in this compartment. What's interesting is that the guest heads is actually the same length, a little bit narrower but the same length, so it's still quite a roomy affair. So we're going to turn back towards the aft of the boat now, and we've got a double cabin here which can be arranged as a double bed or two singles with a sliding berth. Then the other double cabin here which has twins with an infill that can be a double as well. And if we swing round, this leads us to the ensuite heads, ensuite to one of the cabins, and the day heads as well, of course. Well, one thing you're not going to have to agonise over is the question of upgrades or changes or different models or different arrangements. It was bog standard throughout. It's 2011 to 2015 production history. So that's a galley up layout, saloon, fantastic helm, and the three cabins you saw earlier. Now, picking the boat with the right engines or the correct engines or the best engines can sometimes be a bit of an issue with some boats, but that's not the case here. There are only two options. There was the 575 horsepower VOLVO D9 and the 670 horsepower VOLVO D11. And when I tested this boat back in 2011, I got 32.7 knots with about half load. And Fairline subsequently tested the boat and got 32.4 knots, but with a much heavier load. So that rather sort of suggests that the boat can handle extra load quite well, which is good on a boat like this because it has so much storage space on board, so it's likely to be heavy loaded in some circumstances. One thing you won't have to worry about is service access and space in the engine room. Those two engines, the D9 and the D11, were near as damn it the same size, within a few millimetres, so whichever engine you opt for, you're going to have no problem moving around and performing daily service checks in this boat. I suppose one of the things that could influence you is the hull colour. This one is a very dark blue, steel blue it was called, and there were two other colours, white and a beautiful light bronze called sable. I guess if you're taking the boat out to the Med and it's very hot, then you might be looking for a light hull colour, but wrapping is so easy these days to achieve that I actually think the hull colour is a fairly inconsequential buying decision. This boat had three really big ticket items which might influence your buying decision, all back at this end of the boat. So the first one was the crew cabin, and although you would get the lazarette anyway, the great advantage of the crew cabin is you've got the glazing running across the transom, which really lightened up that space. And hidden across the back end of the hardtop is a retractable, electrically powered sunshade that comes out and covers the cockpit. That was sort of top dollar, but obviously makes quite a difference to the practicality and habitability of the cockpit. That was an optional extra as well. Now the third item is absolutely key, because although it was a £20,000 optional extra, it's what actually makes this boat work and function in the way that it does. So Fairline abandoned the traditional high-low bathing platform and instead had this integrated flush tender launch system. So the whole mechanism cantilevers out, and the tender sits on these chocks. These chocks fold away. 4 of them come out, support the tender underneath, and then the whole thing lifts and cantilevers into the water, and off you go on your tender. So this was really sort of pivotal. What it did is it allowed Fairline to extend the hull right to the rearmost extremity of the boat, and they sort of gained, you know, 4 foot of boat in doing so. But it is key to the functioning of the thing. If you have a tender, you're going to need this, or you're going to have to resort to add-on davits later. So if those 3 big things are going to influence your buying decision, so the tender launch system, the retractable sunshade and the crew cabin, the good news for you is that all the boats we've found so far have all those 3 major items as part of their inventory. And there may be boats out there without them, but we haven't come across any yet. I first tested this boat back in 2011, and for me one of the outstanding design aspects was the fantastic helm and the dash position. So Fairline achieved this with a sort of bit of a sleight of hand. Instead of having what would be a bulkier, wider seating area down here, they had a chaise longue. Now it might be a bit sort of idiosyncratic for some, but the sort of payoff is just a huge expansive dash, which is a sort of joy to drive from. So I remember when I tested this boat, the sort of sight lines out through the forward screens are fantastic. The helm is set really sort of high up, so even if you're quite compact like me, it's a really terrific view. And even if you are only sort of 5'7", this is my sort of line of sight standing up. You can stand up and see out really clearly out through the sunroof. So, and then on the dash, there's just so much space for all the sort of instrumentation you need. So 2 12-inch Garmin chart plotters were quite sort of standard fare on these boats, but there's space for another 1, 2, 3, 4 of the sort of typical size, you know, MFDs, multifunction displays, space for charts up here. Instruments are very clear directly in front of you, so it's really difficult to see how you could improve this space. It really is a terrific space to drive from, and a particularly good space for rubbernecking the scenery as you go by. Terrific, real high point for me. So we're going to wander into the cockpit and ponder this area. think it's fairly obvious that Fairline have made a deliberate trade here. The seating isn't huge, they could have packed more in, but they would have lost one of the entrances down onto the bathing platform. And it's an interesting trade. The advantage, of course, is that it's incredibly free-flowing cockpit, and however many people are teaming on and off the bathing platform, in and out of the cockpit, it's never going to get jammed here. An aspect of this boat which I really like is that the designers back then, Andy and Graham and Adam, were just an incredibly extravagant threesome. So the detailing on this boat is fantastic. You've got these big foredeck lockers here which could take a couple of small fenders and just all the mooring ropes you can ever imagine buying. And then moving forward, we've got an anchor locker that's the size of some small cabins on some boats. I mean, it's huge. That's an 8-man life raft, and there's space for 2 fenders either side here and the anchor chain down here. Really nice detailing, beautifully machined alloy custom made hatches. I remember going to the design office when they were designing those with great pride, specially made. Here's another bit of nice detailing. You can't actually see it very well, but this sunroof was engineered in conjunction with Lola Engineering, and to make sure all the water stays out, it has a pneumatic seal which inflates once the sunroof is shut, and also helps to stop it rattling underway. This is another really nice bit of detailing, little multi-angled air vents which I'm almost certain look like they've come from an Audi TT. This is another nice detail in the cockpit this time. This is the cockpit seat back in its reclined position, but it can easily be flipped forward to a more upright position courtesy of the little mechanism there. This is another detail which I really like. These transom gates fold flush away like that, and then there's this beautiful moulded armrest here which must have cost a fortune to make, but Fairline went ahead and did it anyway, and to hell with the cost. Some of the details on this boat are so subtle you could easily miss them, so just to make it easier to get the table leafs out, there are little finger recesses here set into the table, and a little rubber strip to stop it banging when you close it. This is another thing I really like, is the dressing table. This is quite sort of instructive in another way. I mean, it's beautifully made, but it's quite sort of hard edged, and despite the fact this boat is a decade old, all the corners have survived really well. They're not chipped or knocked or whatever, and this boat has obviously had some use, but the furniture has survived really well. So there we have it, the Fairline Targa 50 GT on the most gloriously sunny day I've ever seen in Portland, the most sunny day I've seen this year. So, what are we to make of the boat? Well, obviously you have to be on board with a galley up arrangement. It's not for everybody, although I personally would never buy any other type of boat. I know for the owner of this boat, Tony Green, that clear-cut separation, private sleeping accommodation downstairs, comfortable socialising upstairs, was a really big deal when he bought the boat, a big plus point, not a drawback in any way, not that he saw any. However, if you are comfy with that arrangement, then the Fairline Targa 50 GT does represent something special in the pantheon of 50 to 54 foot sports cruisers, and I think the Targa 50 GT is one of the great unsung heroes of the 21st century sports cruiser world. If I had another 350,000 in my piggy bank, I might buy the boat myself.